Hi, my name is Haley Pickler, and today I'd like to tell you all about sentence modifiers. A modifier is a word, phrase, or clause that describes or specifies something about another word, phrase, or clause. Modifiers should be placed close to the word or words that they describe. Modifiers can be phrases, adjectives, adjective clauses, adverbs, adverb clauses, absolute phrases, infinite phrases, participle phrases, and prepositional phrases, along with many other different things. Modifiers are just like teenagers. They fall in love with whatever they are next to. Make sure that they are next to something that they ought to modify. While modifiers are great for adding detail, description, and interest to sentences, they must be used carefully so that the reader understands the details being added. Writers generally make two major modifier mistakes: dangling modifiers and misplaced modifiers. When you discover a misplaced or dangling modifier in a sentence, you will need to rearrange and or revise the sentence parts to untangle the idea that the sentence wants to express. Now I will teach you all about the different types of modifiers, how they are used incorrectly in sentences, and how to fix those so they are correct. The first one I'd like to go over is the dangling modifier. Dangling modifiers occur when the subject of the modifier is unclear. Most dangling modifiers occur at the beginning of sentences, but they can also occur at the end. These dangling modifiers can be fixed by adding the subject that the modifier is intended to describe to the main clause, or by adding a subject to the modifier itself. Now in this first example, it goes, "Scrubbing the tile grout with bleach and an old toothbrush, the mildew stains began to fade." Now, the way the modifier is used in this sentence makes it sound like the mildew stains were scrubbing the tile grout with bleach and an old toothbrush, and we know that's not possible, and so instead of putting the mildew stains scrubbing, we need to put something there that can actually perform this task. In this case, we're using a person called David. So that way the sentence would read, "As David scrubbed the tile grout with bleach and an old toothbrush, the mildew stains began to fade." Right. The next example is this one. "To finish by the 1 p.m. deadline, the computer keyboard sang with Penny's flying fingers." Now, the computer can't finish by the 1 p.m. deadline because it doesn't even say what it can finish, and computers don't really do well with deadlines. We need to put something there that can. In this case, a person named Penny. So by adding Penny to the sentence, the proper way to say it would be, "To finish by the 1 p.m. deadline, Penny made the keyboard sing with her flying fingers." Wrapping the pencil on the edge of the desk, the answer to the history test would not come to mind. Now the answer can't wrap the pencil on the edge of the desk, and we all know that, but the way the modifier is placed in the sentence, that's how it makes it sound. Just like the other two examples, you need to add a person or a thing, in this case Rodney, to make the sentence correct. So it would read, "Wrapping the pencil on the edge of the desk, Rodney could not remember the answer to the history test." Slathering the popcorn with melted butter, the calorie count skyrocketed. Now the calorie count can't slather the popcorn with melted butter. Just like the previous examples, we need to add a person, in this case Jerry, and then we can rearrange the words in the sentence to make it make sense and still use the modifier that we used originally. So that would sound like this: "When Jerry decided to slather the popcorn with melted butter, the calorie count skyrocketed." And now our last example on dangling modifiers. "Too hungry to wait for Angel's return from the restroom, the plate of cheese sticks quickly disappeared." Now, in my house, cheese sticks disappear, but they don't do it on their own. They have to have something to cause them to disappear. And also, the way this modifier is used here makes it sound like the plate of cheese sticks were too hungry to wait for Angel's return from the restroom, and cheese sticks can't be hungry. So in order to still convey your message and to use your modifier properly, you need to rearrange it and add a way that the cheese sticks disappear and who causes them to disappear, and who is waiting for Angel to return from the restroom. So the proper way to say the sentence would be, too hungry to wait for Angel's return from the restroom, Sheldon quickly ate the plate of cheese sticks. Now we're going to discuss misplaced modifiers. Misplaced modifiers occur when the subject of the modifier is unclear because the modifier is poorly placed, causing the reader to be unsure of what word that the modifier is describing and to think that the misplaced modifier is describing a different word than intended. Right. So our first example is, Mary was delighted when Mr. Johns returned her perfect calculus test with an ear-to-ear grin. The way that the modifier is in this sentence, it makes it sound like the calculus test had an ear-to-ear grin, and that's not possible. Either Mary or Mr. Johns has to have the ear-to-ear grin. In this case, it's Mr. Johns. And so in order to rewrite that where it makes sense, it would sound like this. With an ear-to-ear grin, Mr. Johns returned the perfect calculus test, which delighted Mary. Right. Attached to the email, Anne sent her friend Reed another photo of her pet gecko. And the way the modifier is put in this sentence, it makes it sound like Anne was attached to the email, and I don't think that's what the author meant. I think the author meant that she wanted to attach the photo of a pet gecko. So in order for the reader to understand what she's saying, she should have said this instead. Anne emailed her friend Reed another photo of her pet gecko. So that one makes more sense. Alright. Hungry for dinner, the surface is where Mary and the goldfish waited in anticipation of food flakes. Now, the surface can't be hungry for dinner. It's just the place where Mary and the goldfish is waiting in anticipation. It's not what is hungry for dinner. So if you want Mary and the goldfish to be hungry for dinner, you should write it like this. Hungry for dinner, Mary and the goldfish waited at the surface in anticipation of food flakes. Okay. Jennifer made the mistake of walking her boisterous dog Russell in high heels. Now the way that the modifier is placed in this sentence, it makes it sound like the boisterous dog Russell is in high heels, and hopefully that's not the case. I think what the author meant is that Jennifer was in high heels. And so in order to get that purpose across, they should have been said like this. Jennifer made the mistake of walking her boisterous dog Russell while she was wearing high heels. They added the pronoun she at the end to make it sound like she was wearing them, not the dog Russell. And now our last example over misplaced modifiers. Howard's foot indicated his nervousness during the interview, which shook tremendously. Now, unless this interview took place in California or any other place where there's any fault lines, I don't think the interview was what was shaking tremendously. It had to be something like Howard or his foot. In this case, it's Howard's foot because he was nervous during his interview. So in order to write that where it doesn't make it sound like they're near a fault line, is Howard's tremendously shaking foot indicated his nervousness during the interview. Now besides the major modifiers, which are dangling and misplaced, there are also two other types of modifiers, squinting and limiting. But first we'll talk about squinting modifiers. Squinting modifiers are modifiers that are misplaced so that they might describe two different situations. Here are some examples. Students who miss class frequently fail the course. Now in this sentence, it's not clear whether frequently is talking about the first part or the second part. This could be read to mean students who miss class frequently or students who frequently fail the course. They're two different things. In the sentence, the way it's written, it can mean either one. In our next sentence, Patrick's mom asked him where he finished his homework to take out the trash. In the way this is written, it isn't clear whether Patrick was finished with his test, his mom asked him to take out the trash, or if she wanted him to take out the trash when he was finished with his test. the author of the sentence didn't make it clear. So when you're using modifiers, you need to make sure that your idea is conveyed properly and that the reader can tell what you mean. Now, the last type of modifier is the limiting modifier. Limiting modifiers use words such as only and always that enforce restrictions on the subject, noun, or pronoun that they immediately precede. If the limiting modifier does not precede the subject or noun, the meaning of an entire sentence is changed, as you'll see here in this example. Now, the first sentence is, she gave almost $500 to charity. In this sentence, she, whoever she is, gave almost $500 to charity. That's quite a bit of money. And the second sentence goes, she almost gave $500 to charity. And this one, it means that she didn't give money, but she almost did. Now, the only difference between these two sentences is that the words almost and gave were reversed. And that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but just by reversing those two, it changed the meaning of the sentence completely into meaning that she didn't give money or that she gave almost $500. And that conveys a much different meaning than it was generally intended to. Now, and there's two others as well. There's a pre-modifier and a post-modifier. And those are just different types of modifiers. The pre-modifier is a modifier that is placed before the head, which is the modified component of the sentence, and the post-modifier is a modifier that is placed after the head. And that's not any different types of incorrect modifiers, that's just where you place them. It depends on if they're pre or post modifier. And when you're doing modifiers, you definitely need to make sure to use your punctuation properly. Punctuation is very important when you're placing modifiers. Commas are generally used in modifiers, and they need to be correct. That way you can convey the message properly, because one comma can change the entire sentence, the meaning of your sentence, and your reader won't understand what you're saying. Now, I'd like to credit my sources. The special thanks to the Norton Handbook, the Purdue University Online Writing Lab, OWL, and the Grammar Bites at www.chompchomp.com. Alright. Thanks for listening to this video. I hope you learned a lot about sentence modifiers and that you have a good day.